The night air was electric at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas. Thousands of fans packed the stadium, eyes fixed on the field, hearts pounding with anticipation. Game 4 of the World Series was underway, a battle that had captured the attention of not just sports enthusiasts but the nation as a whole. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Yet, amid the sea of baseball jerseys, foam fingers, and the cacophony of cheers, there was a presence that drew attention in a very different way. Sitting in the front row, in seats that were supposed to symbolize prestige and exclusivity, were none other than Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The couple, famous for their royal lineage, their global media presence, and their contentious exit from official royal duties, were now at the heart of an American spectacle, one that would not unfold in their favor. From the moment they arrived, the eyes of the stadium turned, cameras flashed, and whispers ricocheted through the stands. Here were two people who were no strangers to public scrutiny, but the rules of celebrity were different in the context of America's pastime. This was not a red carpet event or a private gala. This was a baseball stadium filled with die-hard fans, some of whom were not shy about expressing exactly what they thought. There was anticipation in the air, not for the game alone, but for the arrival of the royals who had become figures of fascination and, increasingly, controversy. People had opinions about Harry and Meghan, opinions that ranged from admiration to derision, and tonight those opinions would manifest in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. As they settled into their seats, directly ahead of legends like Sandy Koufax and Magic Johnson, the couple must have believed that their position, surrounded by some of the most respected figures in sports, would afford them both privacy and recognition. They were front and center, visible to all, and yet, ironically, it was that visibility that would soon become their undoing. Within minutes, the initial curiosity of the crowd began to shift. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs escalated to loud comments, and before long, the atmosphere had transformed from casual observation to a targeted chorus of boos and heckles. The first few jeers were subtle, scattered, almost polite in their delivery. A smattering of grumbles, a half-hearted boo, barely audible over the roar of the crowd as the game continued. Perhaps, for a moment, the couple could have convinced themselves that it was merely excitement at seeing them up close, a mix of awe and disbelief at their proximity. But then came the chants, the pointed remarks, and the audible laughter. Some fans waved their arms, gesturing in disapproval, while others shouted commentary meant to embarrass, challenge, and provoke. Security personnel in nearby aisles exchanged glances, sensing that the situation was escalating beyond mere fan enthusiasm. The couple, accustomed to admiration, media attention, and sometimes hostility, were confronted with a different reality. A public spectacle in which they were not the orchestrators, but the targets. Social media erupted almost instantly. Cameras in the stands captured every reaction. The furrowed brows, the awkward smiles, the attempts to wave or acknowledge the crowd politely. Within seconds, clips began circulating online, garnering millions of views, likes, and comments. Fans at home debated the morality of booing the royals, questioned their place in the stadium, and speculated on what exactly prompted the outrage. Was it resentment? Was it cultural misunderstanding? Or was it simply the allure of watching two of the most scrutinized public figures in the world stumble under pressure? Each clip added layers to the narrative, amplifying the humiliation and ensuring that no part of the stadium's audience would soon forget the spectacle. From a psychological perspective, the couple faced a perfect storm. Human behavior in large groups is often magnified, a phenomenon that social scientists refer to as de-individuation. In simpler terms, people in crowds tend to feel emboldened, their social inhibitions reduced, their reactions more extreme. When combined with celebrity presence and high stakes, the result is a volatile environment where emotion, rather than etiquette, rules. Harry and Meghan were confronted with this dynamic firsthand. Their attempts to maintain composure were met with renewed derision, the energy of the crowd feeding on every slight misstep, every hesitant glance, every forced smile. Inside the stadium, the tension was palpable. Even seasoned sports commentators, used to high drama in playoff games, could not ignore the peculiar dynamic unfolding in the front row. Analysts whispered to each other during commercial breaks. Cameras cut to wide shots of the couple trying to appear unfazed, and commentators speculated about what could happen next. This was not a minor skirmish. It was a collision between celebrity status, royal identity, and the raw, unfiltered energy of thousands of fans who had little patience for what they perceived as entitlement. The question on everyone's mind was not about the game itself, but about the inevitability of the moment. When, if ever, would security intervene? The couple's body language told its own story. Harry, usually composed in public appearances, exhibited subtle signs of unease. Shifting in his seat, glancing toward the exits, perhaps calculating escape routes. Meghan, often considered adept at navigating public scrutiny, attempted smiles that barely masked discomfort, offering small waves in an effort to engage the crowd, hoping to diffuse tension. But the crowd had made up its collective mind, and no amount of charm or grace could change the trajectory of the night. Each cheer for the game itself was punctuated by jeers directed at the couple, a dissonant soundtrack that amplified their isolation. And then came the decisive moment. Security personnel, previously standing at a respectful distance, began to converge. Their approach was cautious, measured, designed to protect yet maintain authority. In stadiums across the world, such interventions are rare and delicate, and the presence of two internationally recognized figures only heightened the stakes. Fans leaned forward in anticipation, recognizing that something unprecedented was about to occur. Cameras zoomed in, the stadium lights catching the reflective surfaces of badges and earpieces, and a hush fell over certain sections, a recognition that the spectacle was shifting from verbal to physical. The historical significance of this event cannot be understated. Royals have faced public scrutiny and protest for centuries, yet rarely have they been placed in situations that combine modern celebrity culture, social media amplification, and the spontaneous energy of a live sports event. Tonight, the rules were different. There were no ceremonial protocols, no protective protocols designed to shield them from widespread public disapproval, only the immediacy of a crowd reacting to their presence. This was as raw as it gets, a real-time measure of popularity, influence, and the limits of public tolerance. Even the legends seated behind them, Sandy Koufax and Magic Johnson, could not ignore the unfolding drama. Their expressions were a mixture of polite acknowledgement and subtle discomfort, aware that the situation would soon dominate headlines and social media feeds alike. They had been invited to witness a game, not to participate in a public shaming, yet the presence of the couple in their sightlines added an unexpected tension to the event. Observers would later note that the juxtaposition of royalty with sports legends added a surreal quality to the scene, one that heightened the spectacle for viewers around the world. As the night continued, the narrative began to take shape in real time. What began as curiosity and mild disapproval evolved into a full-blown spectacle. Fans shouted, cameras recorded, and social media amplified every moment, creating a perfect storm of public humiliation that would dominate the news cycle for days. The very act of sitting in a prime location, intended as an honor, had become a symbol of scrutiny, a lens through which every gesture and glance would be dissected. And in that moment, the couple realized that their presence, far from blending seamlessly into the excitement of the World Series, had made them the center of an unfolding drama they could neither control nor escape. The atmosphere in the stadium became a mix of tension and spectacle, an unplanned theater in which the royals were unwilling actors. Each pitch, each swing of the bat, seemed secondary to the drama unfolding in the front row. The fans, sensing the vulnerability of the couple, seemed emboldened, their reactions growing louder, more pointed, more personal. Shouts of disapproval turned into coordinated chants, echoing through the arena and reverberating across the city outside. Cameras from every angle captured Harry and Meghan's discomfort, ensuring that the moment would live forever online and in media coverage. It was in these moments that the power of public perception became painfully clear. Harry and Meghan, often seen as confident navigators of media attention, faced a situation where neither charm, status, nor strategic media placement could shield them. This was a crowd that demanded authenticity and did not suffer entitlement lightly. The contrast between their intended front-row prestige and the reality of being targeted by thousands of passionate sports fans highlighted a fundamental truth. Public adoration is conditional, fragile, and easily swayed by circumstance. From a narrative standpoint, the night represented a collision of worlds. British royalty accustomed to ceremony and controlled optics, and the raw, unpredictable energy of American sports culture. Baseball fans are notoriously vocal, and the energy of a live World Series game is unparalleled. Combine that with a couple whose public image is controversial and widely debated, and the result is a scenario ripe for dramatic tension. Every eye in the stadium, every camera lens, every social media post converged on the same story. The royals under siege, exposed not in a palace or on a red carpet, but in a stadium where rules of etiquette are dictated by the crowd, not protocol. Observers would later comment on the subtle cues that foreshadowed the unfolding humiliation. The shift in the crowd's energy, the pointed glances from nearby fans, the occasional burst of laughter aimed directly at the couple. These were not random events. They were signals, a warning that what the couple perceived as a routine, celebratory outing was about to become a defining moment of public embarrassment. Harry and Meghan, despite their experience with global media, were confronted with the reality that the game they were attending was as much about them as it was about the players on the field. Experts in public relations and social psychology would analyze this incident for months to come, dissecting every gesture, every decision, every misstep. The royals' presence in front of such iconic figures as Sandy Koufax and Magic Johnson created a juxtaposition that amplified the spectacle. While the athletes embodied respect earned through years of achievement, the royals, despite their global fame, were suddenly being judged by an entirely different metric. The approval of an audience that valued authenticity, passion, and a sense of equality over inherited privilege. This introduction sets the stage for what would become an unforgettable evening in the history of celebrity appearances at sports events. Harry and Meghan, despite being experienced in the nuances of media attention, found themselves unprepared for the level of direct, personal scrutiny they faced. The night demonstrated the raw power of public sentiment and the unpredictable nature of crowd dynamics. It was not just a game. It was a test of resilience, composure, and public perception under extreme conditions. As the first innings passed, it became clear that the situation would not resolve quietly. The couple's attempts to engage, to smile politely, to maintain dignity were met with renewed jeers and commentary. Every movement was scrutinized, every facial expression analyzed. Security began to recognize the growing risk, positioning themselves strategically around the couple while attempting to maintain a low profile. The tension between visibility and vulnerability reached a crescendo, leaving Harry and Meghan in a precarious position. Trapped by their own status, yet exposed to an audience that was both enthralled and unforgiving. By the time the inning ended, it was apparent that this was no ordinary night at the ballpark. It was an event that would be dissected by tabloids, sports analysts, and social media users alike. The humiliation was not limited to the immediate crowd. It would reverberate worldwide, shaping narratives about the couple's public persona for weeks to come. The stadium had become a stage, the crowd an unrelenting chorus, and Harry and Meghan the unwilling performers in a drama that neither could control. This sets the tone for the rest of the story, where we will explore every angle of the evening. The arrival, the reactions, the escalation, the intervention by security, and the public fallout. We will examine the dynamics of celebrity, the psychology of crowds, and the intersection of cultural expectations that made this event so extraordinary. By the end of the video, viewers will not only witness a detailed account of the incident but also gain insight into why such moments resonate globally, how reputations can shift in a matter of minutes, and what it truly means to be in the public eye when the audience refuses to cooperate. The evening sun was sinking low over Arlington, painting Globe Life Field in hues of gold and amber, as if the stadium itself was preparing for a performance. Fans had been filing in for hours, their excitement palpable, a mix of anticipation for Game 4 of the World Series and the promise of witnessing history in the making. But as the stadium lights flickered on, the energy shifted, a subtle but undeniable buzz weaving through the stands. The source of this tension soon became clear. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were on their way, their arrival confirmed by paparazzi flashes that lit up the exterior as if announcing the coming of royalty. The couple's limousine pulled up outside the stadium, a sleek black vehicle that had become synonymous with high-profile arrivals. Security agents, in dark suits and earpieces, moved with practiced precision, scanning the crowd, assessing potential risks, and coordinating with the stadium's internal security teams. As the doors opened, photographers and journalists scrambled to capture the first images, knowing that these frames would dominate news cycles worldwide. Harry stepped out first, his tall frame and familiar hairline immediately recognizable, while Meghan followed, dressed in understated elegance that contrasted sharply with the flashy energy of the event. They were met with a mix of cheers, gasps, and the first murmurs of disapproval, a microcosm of the complex public perception surrounding them. Fans in the nearby sections craned their necks, snapping photos, whispering excitedly, and attempting to gauge the couple's demeanor. For many, seeing Harry and Meghan in person was a rare opportunity, a chance to witness celebrity and royalty up close. Yet the reactions were far from uniform. Some clapped politely, others exchanged skeptical glances, and a growing number could be heard muttering complaints under their breath. It was evident that the couple's presence alone had introduced a new dynamic to the already charged atmosphere of the World Series. The journey to their seats was not long, but every step was laden with tension. Security cleared a narrow path through the throngs of fans, guiding the couple past camera crews, waving hands, and shouted remarks. Each interaction, no matter how small, was a moment of potential exposure, and Harry and Meghan moved with calculated composure, their faces maintaining a mask of polite neutrality. For onlookers, every glance, every gesture was a point of speculation. Were they nervous, defensive, composed as always? The ambiguity fueled the crowd's fascination, heightening the anticipation for what would unfold once they reached their front-row positions. As they approached the seats, the reality of their surroundings became impossible to ignore. They were seated directly in front of some of the most respected figures in sports history, Sandy Koufax, whose pitching legacy had shaped generations, and Magic Johnson, whose charisma and basketball prowess had transcended the game itself. The juxtaposition was stark. On one side, American sports legends revered for decades. On the other, internationally famous royals, whose fame was derived not from athletic achievement but from lineage, media presence, and global intrigue. For fans and commentators alike, this positioning created a curious tension, a visual representation of cultural collision that would frame the night's narrative. The couple's initial interaction with the stadium environment was cautious but deliberate. Harry scanned the crowd, nodding subtly to fans who tried to wave or call out, while Meghan offered measured smiles, a hand lifted occasionally in greeting. Yet even these small gestures were met with mixed reactions. Some fans responded warmly, attempting to bridge the cultural and social gap, while others sneered or whispered, their disapproval masked by the ambient noise of the game. Within minutes, it became apparent that this was not going to be a typical celebrity appearance. The crowd's attention was highly selective, and any attempt at engagement was subject to scrutiny and immediate judgment. Paparazzi surrounding the couple snapped images from every conceivable angle. The cameras captured more than just the royal presence. They documented subtle cues of discomfort, the slight tension in Harry's jaw, the careful positioning of Meghan's hands, the almost imperceptible tightening of their posture. These images would later serve as reference points for analysts, commentators, and social media critics, each interpreting the couple's demeanor as a reflection of public acceptance or rejection. The optics were critical, and the couple was acutely aware that they were under continuous observation from multiple vantage points. The crowd, the media, and the stadium's internal surveillance systems. Even before the game began, whispers of discontent began to surface more prominently. Some sections of the crowd, previously passive observers, now expressed their opinions openly. A few fans chanted, half-heartedly at first, questioning the appropriateness of the royals' presence at a public sporting event. Others heckled quietly, trying to gauge the reaction of those around them. The stadium, already alive with the sounds of baseball excitement, now had an additional soundtrack, the murmurings and occasional boos aimed at the royal couple. Security personnel noted these early signs, understanding that the escalation could be swift if the tension continued to rise. The lighting inside the stadium, coupled with the elevated placement of the front row seats, ensured that Harry and Meghan were constantly in view of both the audience and television cameras broadcasting the game live. Every micro-expression was captured, every subtle reaction analyzed. In many ways, the couple's position was a double-edged sword. While the proximity to sports legends. The energy in the stadium reached a palpable level as the couple settled fully into their seats. Fans shifted, craned their necks, and exchanged opinions with those around them. "Is that really them?" one shouted. "Why are they here?" asked another. A ripple of murmurs swept across multiple sections, and it became increasingly clear that the royal presence was no longer a background curiosity. It was now a focal point of the event. In many ways, this initial arrival set the stage for everything that would follow. A night defined not just by athletic competition, but by the interaction between celebrity, royalty, and the unfiltered judgment of the public. From a narrative standpoint, the arrival illustrated several critical dynamics. First, it highlighted the visibility of public figures and the consequences of that exposure. Second, it underscored the cultural clash between royal etiquette and American fan culture. Third, it foreshadowed the escalating tension that would lead to a public confrontation with the crowd, ultimately requiring security intervention. Each element, the arrival, the crowd's initial reactions, the positioning in front of sports legends, created a compound effect, ensuring that what followed would be both unpredictable and intensely scrutinized. As Harry and Meghan finally settled into their front row seats, the enormity of the situation began to manifest. It was no longer just a game. The entire stadium seemed to pivot around them. Fans craned for a better view, whispering, pointing, and occasionally laughing at something perceived as awkward or out of place. Cameras captured these subtle interactions, and within minutes, the first social media posts appeared, sharing initial images and observations. The moment had transcended the immediate physical space of the stadium and entered a digital arena where millions of followers would soon weigh in. For the couple, these first few minutes were a delicate balance between composure and instinct. Harry, ever conscious of the optics surrounding him, adjusted his seating, leaning slightly forward to engage without appearing distant. Meghan, meanwhile, kept her hands poised elegantly, fingers interlocked or resting lightly on her lap, a posture designed to convey calmness and confidence. Yet despite their meticulous awareness, the crowd's reactions were increasingly hard to ignore. A section of fans began murmuring louder, questioning why the royals were occupying such prime positions, a tension that only intensified as more spectators tuned in to televised coverage. Security personnel, meanwhile, maintained vigilant observation. They had anticipated some level of attention but were acutely aware that the volatile mix of celebrity, royalty, and passionate sports fans could quickly escalate. Their presence was discreet yet authoritative, eyes scanning the crowd for potential disruptions, ready to act at a moment's notice. Subtle adjustments in positioning, hand gestures, and micro-communications ensured that any escalation could be managed efficiently, but even the most seasoned security team recognized the uniqueness of this scenario. Never before had the royals been so directly exposed to a crowd whose enthusiasm could so easily tip into outright hostility. Meanwhile, the couple's proximity to sports icons added another layer of scrutiny. Sandy Koufax, legendary for his pitching and dignified public persona, and Magic Johnson, whose charisma and athletic prowess had inspired generations, were seated just behind. Both legends carried an aura of respect earned through achievement rather than inheritance, creating a stark contrast with Harry and Meghan's inherited fame. Observers could not help but notice the subtle differences in crowd reception. Where the sports legends were met with respect and admiration, the royals faced a more complex mix of curiosity, skepticism, and outright criticism. This juxtaposition heightened the tension in the stadium, creating a sense that the royals were under trial before a court of public opinion. As the pre-game ceremonies continued, Harry and Meghan attempted to engage politely, nodding to fans who waved and offering slight smiles to those nearby. Yet even these gestures were met with mixed responses. Some fans returned the acknowledgement with excitement, while others jeered quietly, clearly intent on expressing disapproval. The mixed reactions underscored a critical element of public engagement. Perception is subjective, and in high-stakes scenarios like this, any attempt at composure can be interpreted in multiple ways. The energy shifted noticeably as the first pitch was thrown. While fans cheered for their respective teams, the couple's presence remained a secondary but persistent point of focus. Cameras frequently cut to wide shots of the front row, and commentators subtly acknowledged the royals' attendance. Though the game itself was thrilling, with each swing of the bat and defensive play generating natural excitement, the undercurrent of scrutiny remained constant. The crowd's attention oscillated between the athletes and the couple, creating a tension that neither Harry nor Meghan could escape. This initial arrival period, though seemingly routine, foreshadowed the escalating drama that would soon unfold. It illustrated a fundamental truth about public life. No amount of preparation, poise, or media training can fully mitigate the unpredictable reactions of thousands of individuals reacting collectively. Harry and Meghan were in a setting where traditional rules of respect for royalty held little sway. Here, visibility meant vulnerability, and every glance, smile, or movement could and would be amplified for thousands of onlookers and millions online. By the time the pre-game festivities were drawing to a close, the stage was fully set. The royals had been observed, analyzed, and subtly challenged by the stadium crowd. Every movement had been captured on camera, every expression noted, every gesture scrutinized. They were in the center of a high-stakes social experiment where the variables included celebrity scrutiny, royal status, fan behavior, and the electrifying atmosphere of a World Series game. It was a perfect storm of circumstances that would soon escalate beyond polite murmurs and subtle heckling into a full-blown spectacle requiring direct intervention. In essence, the arrival at the stadium was more than just a moment of entry. It was the opening act of a public drama that would unfold over the next few hours. The couple's every action, the crowd's every reaction, and the omnipresent media coverage combined to create a narrative that was at once compelling, tense, and unavoidable. From the moment they stepped into the stadium, Harry and Meghan were no longer merely spectators of a sporting event. They had become central figures in a story that blended cultural commentary, celebrity scrutiny, and human behavior under pressure. As fans settled into their seats, the first signs of escalation became apparent. The murmurs that began as polite whispers had grown louder, occasionally punctuated by laughter or jeers. Security teams noted the shifts, subtly repositioning themselves in anticipation of potential escalation. The couple, poised and composed, were beginning to realize that their presence, intended to signify prestige and honor, had inadvertently become a focal point for collective judgment. It was a realization that would define the remainder of the evening, setting the tone for the confrontation, humiliation, and public spectacle that was about to follow. As the couple settled into their seats, the stadium was alive with more than just the energy of the World Series. Globe Life Field had become a convergence point for sports legends, celebrities, and fans, each contributing to an atmosphere that was equal parts excitement and spectacle. For Harry and Meghan, this environment offered both prestige and peril. Their front-row position placed them directly in proximity to iconic figures whose presence commanded respect and admiration, intensifying the spotlight on the royal couple. Directly behind them sat Sandy Koufax, whose legacy as a pitching legend had been cemented decades earlier. Known for his precision, humility, and legendary composure under pressure. Koufax represented a level of earned respect that contrasted sharply with the couple's inherited fame. Magic Johnson, the charismatic basketball icon whose athletic brilliance had captivated fans worldwide, was also present. His presence added another layer of significance to the seating arrangement. Here were individuals whose accomplishments were universally celebrated, whose respect had been earned through dedication, performance, and contribution to their respective sports. The contrast could not have been more pronounced. Where Koufax and Johnson were universally admired for tangible achievements, Harry and Meghan were scrutinized for choices, behavior, and the very nature of their celebrity. In many ways, this juxtaposition amplified the tension in the stadium. Fans who revered sports legends were now forced to reconcile their admiration for achievement with the presence of figures whose status was controversial and whose public persona had been heavily debated. This collision of admiration and skepticism would become a recurring theme throughout the evening. As cameras scanned the front row, commentators could not resist noting the lineup of high-profile attendees. Analysts offered running commentary about the significance of the royals' presence, often comparing the couple to the legends seated nearby. Pundits questioned whether their presence in such prominent positions was appropriate, a move likely to invite both scrutiny and potential embarrassment. The comparisons were subtle yet unrelenting, framing Harry and Meghan's every gesture in a narrative of contrast. Here were the self-made icons, and here were the globally famous figures whose influence derived not from professional achievement but from public attention and familial heritage. Fans, too, were keenly aware of these dynamics. Some whispered excitedly about being seated near sports royalty, while others focused on the novelty of witnessing actual British royalty in their midst. For certain attendees, the allure of proximity to Koufax and Johnson was undeniable. For others, the presence of Harry and Meghan added a layer of tension, a visible reminder of the intersection between celebrity culture and traditional sports fandom. Observers noted subtle body language cues. Fans leaned forward to catch glimpses, pointed discreetly, and occasionally attempted to interact with the royals with waves or whispered commentary. Each interaction, however small, was magnified by the energy of the crowd and the omnipresent cameras capturing every moment. The couple's awareness of these dynamics was evident. Harry adjusted his posture to maintain composure, subtly scanning the crowd while ensuring he did not block the view of those seated behind. Meghan, similarly, maintained poise, occasionally acknowledging fans with a measured nod or smile. Yet even these controlled gestures did little to dampen the growing scrutiny. The presence of celebrity icons nearby intensified every movement, creating a sense of heightened visibility that added to the pressure. Any perceived misstep, hesitation, or awkward gesture could, and would be interpreted, shared, and analyzed both inside the stadium and across global media platforms. This arrangement of seating also underscored the unique interplay between celebrity and social hierarchy. Koufax and Johnson were respected because of achievement, dedication, and public service. Harry and Meghan's recognition stemmed from heritage and media coverage. The contrast invited implicit comparison, a narrative lens through which fans and commentators alike began to evaluate the couple's comportment. Every smile, nod, and wave was weighed against the effortless admiration commanded by the sports legends, creating an environment where scrutiny was amplified and the threshold for error was minimal. The pre-game energy was further heightened by the presence of other notable figures scattered throughout the stadium. Former athletes, entertainers, and media personalities mingled in VIP sections, each contributing to the tapestry of attention and expectation. While these additional celebrities were largely spectators themselves, their presence created a network of observation, commentary, and subtle judgment. The royals were now surrounded by a constellation of public figures whose achievements and reputations provided a backdrop against which every move would be assessed. From the perspective of crowd psychology, the presence of multiple celebrities added an extra layer of complexity. Fans naturally gravitate toward figures they admire, yet the addition of Harry and Meghan, whose public image had been polarizing, created a bifurcated response. Some sections of the crowd focused on admiration and excitement, eager to capture moments of proximity and celebrity interaction. Other sections responded with skepticism, resentment, or subtle hostility, viewing the couple as outsiders intruding upon a space traditionally reserved for sports achievement. This dichotomy fueled tension, foreshadowing the escalating reactions that would soon dominate the evening. The couple's proximity to Koufax and Johnson also had implications beyond public perception. Social dynamics in high-profile events are influenced heavily by the behavior of surrounding figures. While the royals were familiar with the gaze of global audiences, the added pressure of being observed by accomplished, respected icons introduced a unique challenge. Every movement, every reaction, was potentially a reflection not only on their personal image but also on the optics of their interaction with these legends. A simple gesture, such as turning to speak with each other, adjusting posture, or even responding to crowd noise, was loaded with interpretive weight, both for fans present and viewers watching globally. As the pre-game ceremonies progressed, the presence of celebrity figures in the stadium amplified the scrutiny. Photographers captured side-by-side images of Harry and Meghan with Koufax and Johnson, a visual comparison that would soon circulate widely on social media. Analysts began dissecting body language, attention, and subtle expressions, framing the couple's behavior in contrast to the calm, confident demeanor of the sports legends. The images and commentary created a narrative that set the stage for the evening's unfolding drama, a tension-filled environment that the couple could neither control nor fully anticipate. This period of observation, while brief, was critical. It established the context in which the royal couple's public image would be challenged. By situating them directly in front of widely admired figures, the event organizers inadvertently created a situation in which every action would be magnified, and every reaction from the crowd would carry heightened significance. The combination of high-profile celebrity proximity, intense media scrutiny, and fan engagement created a volatile environment, one that would soon erupt into the spectacle for which the evening became infamous. By the end of this segment of the evening, it was clear that the royal couple's presence was both a magnet for attention and a lightning rod for controversy. While the sports legends offered a model of calm, earned respect, Harry and Meghan faced a more complex challenge, navigating a crowd that was both fascinated and critical, in a venue where visibility equaled vulnerability, and where public perception would be decided in real time. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the audience was ready. What followed would test not only their composure but the limits of their public acceptance. The first few minutes after Harry and Meghan took their seats were deceptively calm, almost measured. The stadium's energy was primarily focused on the game, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd with every defensive play, the cheers for every strategic pitch. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, a subtle shift was occurring. Spectators near the front row seats were beginning to register the presence of the royals, and their attention slowly transformed from casual curiosity to pointed scrutiny. Murmurs began to ripple through the stands, quiet at first, barely noticeable over the ambient noise of a World Series crowd. But within moments, these whispers began to coalesce into a more cohesive and audible form of public opinion. Fans in the immediate vicinity exchanged glances, leaning forward to catch details that they had previously missed. Meghan's posture, Harry's glance toward the field, even the subtle interaction between them as they adjusted to the seating. The atmosphere was thick with expectation. Some observers were genuinely fascinated, witnessing history as it unfolded, while others were critical, their skepticism bubbling to the surface in hushed tones. Questions began to circulate audibly among the crowd. Why are they here? Do they even follow the sport? Front row, right in front of Koufax and Johnson? The murmurs reflected both disbelief and judgment, signaling the initial stage of the crowd's growing engagement and impending reaction. As the game's first inning progressed, the initial curiosity began to evolve into deliberate observation. Fans not only watched the couple but actively reacted to every movement. A small smile from Meghan prompted applause in one corner of the section and a sarcastic jeer in another. Harry's wave to a fan received mixed responses, some returning the gesture enthusiastically, others shaking their heads or letting out audible sighs. This microcosm of reactions represented the dual nature of public perception. Admiration on one side, criticism on the other. Every subtle gesture by the couple became material for interpretation, fueling conversations, speculation, and, increasingly, direct commentary. The initial audible booing was subtle yet distinct. One fan, emboldened by proximity to others who shared the sentiment, let out a half-hearted boo that quickly gained traction. Others, noticing the reaction, began to echo the sentiment, and soon the sound spread, weaving through the stands like a low undercurrent beneath the cheers for the game. The booing was intermittent at first, an attempt by the crowd to test boundaries, to gauge whether their reaction would provoke a response. Observers described it as almost experimental. Small bursts of disapproval interspersed with general enthusiasm for the sporting event. Social media was quick to capture these early reactions. Spectators began streaming clips on platforms like Twitter and TikTok, highlighting the jeers and subtle tension. Within minutes, hashtags referencing the royal couple's attendance started trending, reflecting the immediate viral potential of the event. Fans outside the stadium, watching via live feeds, quickly joined the commentary, adding layers of interpretation, humor, and criticism. In many ways, the initial crowd reaction at the stadium was amplified exponentially by digital engagement, turning localized disapproval into a global spectacle. Security personnel, positioned strategically around the couple, took note of these early indicators of discontent. While the booing and murmurs were not inherently dangerous, the pattern was concerning. Crowds have a tendency to escalate, particularly when social dynamics and group psychology come into play. Security teams monitored body language, noted the clustering of vocal dissenters, and subtly adjusted their positions to maintain a buffer between the couple and the audience. By the second inning, the crowd's engagement had clearly intensified. Murmurs evolved into louder exclamations, some fans openly vocalizing disapproval. Comments ranged from mild heckling to pointed remarks questioning the couple's relevance or presence. "Who asked them to come?" one fan shouted. "This isn't a royal gala," another added. The stadium's natural acoustics amplified these comments, ensuring that both the couple and nearby spectators were acutely aware of the growing tension. This marked the transition from passive observation to active participation, signaling that the crowd was asserting its opinion in real time. The couple's visibility magnified every aspect of their reaction. Cameras, strategically positioned to capture celebrity arrivals, caught subtle micro-expressions. Meghan's slight tightening of her jaw, Harry's momentary glance toward the exits, the brief hesitation in their gestures. These seemingly minor cues were quickly interpreted by the crowd as evidence of discomfort, which only fueled further booing and commentary. Observers later noted that in situations like this, subtle human responses are magnified, creating a feedback loop in which perceived vulnerability invites additional attention and scrutiny. The dynamics of group behavior became increasingly apparent. Spectators influenced one another, with initial murmurs evolving into coordinated chants and synchronized jeers. The social psychology of the crowd took over. Individuals, emboldened by collective expression, participated more vocally than they might have alone. The phenomenon of de-individuation was at play, a psychological effect in which people in groups feel less restrained and more willing to engage in behavior they might otherwise avoid. Harry and Meghan were now at the center of a collective expression of judgment, their presence acting as a catalyst for group behavior amplified by anonymity and shared emotion. At this stage, the interplay between physical presence and media amplification became crucial. As the crowd reacted, smartphone cameras captured each audible boo, each facial expression, and each gesture. Clips were uploaded in real time, shared widely, and analyzed by commentators, social media users, and news outlets. This digital feedback loop magnified the initial crowd reaction exponentially, ensuring that the couple's discomfort was not confined to the stadium but extended to a global audience almost instantaneously. By the end of the initial phase of crowd reaction, it was clear that the evening's events had shifted from a simple sports gathering to a charged social spectacle. The combination of public visibility, celebrity contrast, group psychology, and digital amplification created a scenario in which Harry and Meghan were under intense scrutiny from multiple directions simultaneously. Their every reaction, expression, and gesture was now part of an ongoing narrative that would define both their night at the ballpark and subsequent media coverage. By the third inning, the energy surrounding Harry and Meghan had shifted dramatically. What had begun as subtle murmurs and tentative boos had grown into a more pronounced and consistent display of disapproval. The initial curiosity of the crowd had evolved into active participation, with fans now openly expressing their sentiments in ways that left little room for ambiguity. The stadium, already a crucible of tension due to the World Series stakes, had become a theater of social dynamics, where every gesture of the royal couple was magnified and dissected by thousands in real time. The escalation began almost imperceptibly. A few fans, emboldened by their neighbors' reactions, began louder chants, testing the couple's response. Words of mild derision were muttered, then repeated, gradually forming a chorus that filled the aisles. The first isolated jeer became a sustained thread of vocal criticism. From one section to another, the noise rippled, and the pattern of collective engagement became evident. This was not spontaneous but organized in its emergent form, a social phenomenon in which individuals feed off the energy of the group, amplifying the effect of a few vocal participants into a stadium-wide reaction. Observers could see the change in the couple's demeanor. Meghan's subtle smiles became more restrained, her hands often resting on her lap rather than waving or engaging with the crowd. Harry's posture, usually relaxed and confident, displayed minute signs of tension. He shifted in his seat, scanning the crowd more frequently, eyes darting to areas where fans were particularly animated. Every micro-expression became material for interpretation, both by those seated nearby and by the cameras capturing the front row. Analysts would later note that in situations like this, microbehavioral cues are amplified by perception, feeding into the crowd's energy and reinforcing the intensity of their reactions. The interaction between the couple and the crowd became a feedback loop. The louder the crowd reacted, the more the couple attempted to maintain composure, which, in turn, seemed to invite additional scrutiny. A hesitant wave or a forced smile was interpreted as either insincerity or nervousness, provoking further reactions. The escalation was compounded by the presence of high-profile figures nearby, Sandy Koufax and Magic Johnson, whose calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension in the royal couple. The optics were impossible to ignore. Achievements earned through skill and dedication versus attention derived from global fame and lineage, an unavoidable comparison for both the crowd and the cameras capturing every angle. Within minutes, the booing had developed into more complex forms of heckling. Comments were no longer limited to mild disapproval but became pointed, personal, and sometimes sarcastic. Spectators shouted questions and statements that demanded acknowledgement. "Why are you even here? This isn't your world. Go back to your palace." Each remark was a challenge, a way for the crowd to assert dominance over the situation, to reclaim control in a scenario where the royals had initially assumed authority through their elevated seats. The escalation was not solely verbal. Nonverbal expressions played a significant role in amplifying the intensity. Fans leaned forward aggressively, pointing fingers or gesturing toward the couple. Some rolled their eyes dramatically, while others shook their heads or laughed loudly. These subtle cues, when multiplied across thousands of spectators, created a psychological pressure that is difficult to quantify but impossible to ignore. For Harry and Meghan, the sensation was immersive. They were at the center of a concentrated wave of judgment and emotion that seemed to surge with every inning. Social media began to mirror the stadium's energy. Live clips captured the crowd's reactions and the couple's restrained responses, leading to instant analysis, commentary, and, in some cases, ridicule. Hashtags referencing the incident began trending within minutes. Observers outside the stadium debated the appropriateness of booing, speculated about the royals' behavior, and compared the scene to prior public appearances. The escalation was no longer confined to the physical space of the stadium. It had transcended into a global discourse, amplified by the immediacy of digital platforms. Security, already aware of the increasing tension, adjusted their positions strategically. Personnel began to anticipate potential flashpoints, moving subtly to ensure that they could respond efficiently without drawing further attention. Their presence, though discreet, was a constant reminder of the stakes. This was not merely crowd control, it was a proactive management of a scenario that was escalating both emotionally and socially. Each shout, chant, or gesture from the fans had the potential to trigger a response, and security had to balance intervention with the risk of escalating the situation further. The couple's attempts at composure were met with mixed success. Meghan's subtle nods to appreciative fans were drowned out by louder jeers elsewhere. Harry's measured waves were overshadowed by chants questioning their relevance and presence. In real time, this created a dissonance that made maintaining dignity increasingly difficult. Each acknowledgement of the crowd's reaction was carefully measured, yet in the heightened environment, even the smallest gesture became fodder for scrutiny, both in the stadium and across social media. As the game progressed, the crowd's reaction intensified further. The initial novelty of royal presence had faded, replaced by a collective insistence that the couple recognize the crowd's disapproval. Isolated heckles coalesced into unified responses. The murmurings of a few became the vocalization of thousands. Observers noted that the dynamic was both psychological and performative. The crowd, aware of cameras and digital amplification, behaved not just to express disapproval but to ensure the spectacle would reach a wider audience. Every boo, every chant, every gesture was part of a deliberate collective performance, designed to elicit a reaction and cement the narrative of the royals under scrutiny. This escalation created a palpable tension that permeated the stadium. Fans in surrounding sections began to take notice, some joining in, others merely observing with fascination. The energy was infectious, a cascade effect in which individual actions, amplified by collective enthusiasm, produced a dynamic that was increasingly difficult to control. Harry and Meghan, now fully aware of the crowd's intentions, faced a scenario in which their ability to maintain composure was being tested against the relentless pressure of thousands of spectators, amplified by media presence and social media commentary. By the middle of the third inning, the escalation had reached a level where intervention seemed inevitable. The combination of persistent booing, targeted heckling, and the visual amplification provided by cameras and smartphones created a situation where the couple's presence in the front row was no longer sustainable without some form of management. The crowd's energy, while initially focused on curiosity and mild disapproval, had transformed into a concentrated force demanding acknowledgement and action. In summary, the escalation phase demonstrated how subtle crowd reactions could rapidly intensify into sustained and targeted displays of disapproval. The interaction between individual behavior, group dynamics, and media amplification created a scenario in which the royals' every movement was scrutinized, judged, and interpreted. By this point, it was clear to both the couple and the security team that the situation was moving beyond verbal challenge into a high-stakes social spectacle, one that would require direct intervention if the evening was to continue without incident. By the middle of the fourth inning, the atmosphere in Globe Life Field had reached a critical point. What began as polite curiosity and scattered murmurs had escalated into a full-scale display of disapproval from the crowd. The sustained booing, heckling, and pointed gestures signaled that the situation was no longer a matter of passive observation. It was an active challenge to Harry and Meghan's presence. Security, having monitored the evolving tension from the outset, recognized that a direct intervention might soon be necessary to protect the couple and maintain order within the stadium. Security personnel began their approach with calculated precision. Teams positioned themselves strategically around the front row seats, creating subtle physical buffers between the royals and the increasingly vocal spectators. Their movements were deliberate but discreet, designed to assert authority without escalating the situation further. Small clusters of guards moved into key vantage points, eyes scanning for any potential flashpoints, while others prepared for immediate action if the crowd's behavior became physically threatening. The staff's objective was clear: maintained safety while preserving as much dignity as possible for the royals. Harry and Meghan, seated in the eye of the storm, could sense the subtle shift in the space around them. The presence of additional security personnel, the slight repositioning of guards, and the focused attention of those monitoring the crowd all signaled a heightened state of alert. Harry's composure, though still intact, showed signs of tension. His eyes scanned the crowd more frequently, and his posture became more guarded. Meghan mirrored a similar awareness, her hands resting firmly on her lap, her face a mask of controlled neutrality. Their awareness of security's proactive stance underscored the seriousness of the crowd's escalating disapproval. The crowd itself seemed to register the arrival of additional security, though not necessarily in a way that would reduce hostility. Fans often react to visible authority with either submission or challenge, and in this case the majority appeared emboldened. The volume of boos intensified, and chants grew louder. Spectators waved arms, pointed fingers, and engaged in coordinated calls designed to provoke a reaction. Security had to carefully assess which individuals posed an immediate risk and which were contributing to the psychological intensity of the moment without crossing the threshold of safety. The visual presence of security had both a protective and symbolic function. On one level, the personnel served as a physical shield, ready to act in case of aggression or escalation. On another, their positioning reinforced the extraordinary nature of the event. This was not a routine appearance, but a situation in which a couple of internationally recognized figures were subject to direct scrutiny and potential hostility in a highly charged public space. Every movement by the guards was both functional and performative, signaling preparedness while attempting to minimize escalation. As security subtly surrounded the couple, the intensity of the crowd's focus increased. Cameras captured wide shots, highlighting the contrast between the royal couple's calm composure and the subtle tension radiating from the crowd. Observers noted that even minor gestures, Harry adjusting his seat, Meghan offering a tentative wave, were interpreted through the lens of public judgment, amplified by social media and live broadcasts. The situation had shifted from passive observation to active social drama, where visibility and vulnerability intersected in a high-stakes performance. Security's approach required careful coordination with stadium staff and internal monitoring systems. Team leaders communicated through discrete earpieces, tracking crowd movement, vocal intensity, and body language cues. Every shout, cheer, or gesture was assessed in real time. The strategy was not simply to respond to physical threats, but to anticipate escalation and manage psychological pressure. Guards positioned themselves along sight lines to prevent any sudden advances, while maintaining a low profile to avoid making the crowd feel cornered or threatened. A delicate balance in a stadium filled with thousands of emotionally invested fans. The presence of the sports legends seated nearby added complexity to the security operations. Sandy Koufax and Magic Johnson, icons in their own right, were observers as well as potential intermediaries in public perception. Security personnel had to ensure that any movement around the royals did not disrupt the view or comfort of these figures, while also maintaining an unobtrusive shield. The juxtaposition of accomplished athletes with the royals heightened the spectacle, making the front-row dynamic an intersection of celebrity, legacy, and authority under intense scrutiny. At this point, Harry and Meghan were acutely aware that the crowd's attention was no longer merely observational. It was confrontational. The persistent jeers, chants, and visual cues of disapproval made it clear that their continued presence in the front row without intervention was unsustainable. Security communicated subtly with the couple, offering reassurances while preparing for controlled extraction if necessary. The objective was to remove them from immediate exposure without creating a spectacle that could further inflame the crowd. The psychological dynamics of this intervention were intricate. A crowd in full engagement can be unpredictable. De-individuation and group reinforcement amplify behavior, meaning that minor provocations can rapidly escalate. Security's decision-making had to account for both immediate safety and the long-term optics of the intervention. Any overtly aggressive maneuver risked negative publicity, while inaction risked further humiliation and potential physical confrontation. The team navigated this balance with precision, ensuring that the royals' removal, if it became necessary, would be as dignified and controlled as possible under the circumstances. Meanwhile, fans continued to vocalize their opinions. Some remained critical, their jeers intensifying with each movement of the security team. Others documented the unfolding event on smartphones, live streaming or recording videos that would circulate across social media in real time. This digital amplification increased the stakes for security, as any misstep or appearance of mishandling could become an international talking point within minutes. The combination of in-stadium tension and global attention created a high-pressure environment, requiring skillful, deliberate action. Subtle shifts in the couple's body language indicated their awareness and acceptance of security's role. Meghan's composed demeanor, though strained, suggested trust in the team's ability to manage the situation. Harry's measured acknowledgement of security's presence, coupled with slight nods and glances, demonstrated both awareness and cooperation. These nonverbal cues were critical in maintaining order, signaling to the crowd and cameras alike that intervention, if necessary, would be executed with dignity rather than confrontation. As the innings progressed, the stage was set for a controlled yet unavoidable action. Security's positioning, the crowd's sustained engagement, and the couple's visible awareness of the mounting scrutiny created a scenario where extraction or relocation was no longer optional but inevitable. Every observer, from fans in the stands to viewers watching globally, understood that the situation was approaching a pivotal moment. The tension in the stadium was not just about the game. It was about authority, visibility, and the boundaries of public tolerance. The preparation by security also underscored a fundamental principle in crowd management. Anticipation is as important as reaction. By positioning personnel strategically, maintaining continuous observation, and communicating effectively, the team ensured that the royal couple could be removed if necessary without chaos or injury. This careful orchestration of safety, optics, and crowd psychology set the stage for the dramatic intervention that would soon dominate headlines. By the end of this segment, the narrative was clear. Harry and Meghan's front-row presence had escalated into a scenario requiring deliberate security management. The tension, amplified by fan behavior, media coverage, and social dynamics, necessitated a precise, measured response to prevent both physical and reputational harm. The stage was now fully prepared for the next chapter, the actual escort from the front row, which would mark a defining and widely publicized moment of public humiliation. The tension in Globe Life Field reached a near boiling point as the fourth inning drew to a close.